Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast, a conversation aimed at understanding all sides of mental health, addiction recovery, and homelessness. Each interview will include one's personal experiences and insights, or an expert's advice and knowledge within one of these fields. The goal is to promote awareness, guidance, and support for anyone who is affected by these challenges. Thank you all for listening. Welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast. This is your host, Brendan.cutuli, and we are here today for Season 2, Episode number 15 with Tim Desmond. In the first part of this episode, Tim spoke about psychology, mental health, and specifically self-compassion, and really why he took this really next step, this initiative, in order to be a part of the mental health industry. Within this episode, we're going to be speaking about Peer Collective, a new startup that Tim has begun. And really, Tim, to start off, to share with my audience what Peer Collective is, can you give a brief introduction just about what it is, the main objective of Peer Collective, and what really problem is Peer Collective trying to solve today?
Well, yeah, so there's a huge number of people in the world who don't have enough access to mental health support, to sort of emotional support in general. There's a huge number of people who would like to be getting more support than they are, and it's for both cost, convenience, and stigma, who aren't getting it. Basically, so the story kind of goes like this. In 2015, I wrote my first book, and it's called Self-Compassion in Psychotherapy. And a friend of mine, who's a colleague, asked, so do you think that if every therapist in the country read this book, that the field would be more effective? Now, I'm aware of a lot of research that shows training therapists doesn't make them more effective. And so I said, well, no, probably not. And so then the question was like, well, what would actually make the mental health field be able to do a better job? Because as we all know, there's a growing crisis in mental health that is showing up in terms of suicide, drugs, loneliness, just like a tremendous need for more mental health support in our society. So I started imagining, what if you could just hit a button on your phone and be connected with a highly compassionate and empathetic person whenever you need support? And what if the price was low enough that it wasn't an obstacle for almost anyone? And so that gave rise to sort of thinking about this project. Now, a couple of years later, I had written another book, and I was invited to the Google campus to give an author talk. When I was there, I met a software engineer, David Yuchen, who was really passionate about mental health. And he said he wanted to do a project at Google for mental health. Would I look at some of the ideas that he had? And I said, sure. And I looked at them. And then at the end, I said, if you want to do a mental health project, you should really do online peer counseling, because it doesn't exist and it really should. So we ended up he said, well, let's do that together. And so we put together a proposal. Google funded it, and we ran this as a project at Google for 8 months. And then during that time, the project went really well. And what we found was that people from tremendously diverse backgrounds relate to the idea of peer counseling, which is basically relate to the idea of getting emotional support from somebody where the basis of the relationship is a shared experience, instead of the basis of the relationship is that they're going to diagnose you and try to treat you as though you have a disease. And that sort of medical model. That people really like the idea of getting support from people that have a shared experience. Some people wanted to use it to supplement professional therapy, like working with like a psychologist or psychiatrist and also using Peer Collective. And then some people want it basically just like, this is actually a better fit for me than going to a professional. So we found that we developed this sort of video assessment where when people want to be peer counselors, we can put them through an assessment where they watch 7 short videos of really challenging interactions. And then we video record their responses. So like the first one is like, so you're acting really nice to me, but you're paid to be nice, so it kind of feels phony. And then, so what would you say to that? We video record it. And after we do 7 of those, there's another one that says, I came here to talk to you to try to feel better. And now after talking to you, I feel worse. What do you say to that? We video record it, and we were able to create a way that we could predict, just watching 5 to 10 minutes of video, we could predict who was going to be a good counselor. And so what we were actually able to do was instead of the idea of like we're going to hire anybody and then try to train them to be a good listener, we could only take people who are already good listeners and then put them through like a really great training. And what we found was putting that kind of group together, people had incredibly high levels of user satisfaction. Like people really liked the quality of the counseling that they were getting. And that's not really true when you go to sort of an average therapist. There are amazing therapists out there that fully deserve whatever like $250 an hour they charge because they're extremely talented. But the average therapist is often not that helpful for people. And so what we want to be able to do with Peer Collective is make something that's an above average offering, but that's also extremely affordable. And so right now, a half-hour session over Zoom, which is like either video or audio call, with Peer Collective is only $14. And the idea is putting it at a price where people can really access it. So the hope is to create a world that's that type of world of like where that everybody would know if you need support, if you're feeling alone, if there's just like whatever stress or whatever you're needing, that people would feel this confidence that I just hit this button and for $14, I can talk with someone that I know is going to be helpful. So that's kind of like what we're trying to make happen there.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, introduction into what Peer Collective is, so people can get a good glimpse as to, what services you are providing today, and, to speak about what you are providing, and, maybe even to touch a little bit upon more of, how peer counseling is going to be a new realm in terms of providing services rather than having an expert in the field, giving this third-party perspective of, what are you struggling with, and here's a diagnosis, and here's how we know you can treat through this issue. How can you explain how peer counseling, how this shared experience is a different way, a new lens in order to, treat and heal through trauma rather than having, just an expertise opinion on how you're able to assist others, and moreover delegating someone rather than listening and providing even a shoulder to lean on in order of what they've experienced in their life.
Anybody who's been to a really excellent therapist will talk about how valuable it is. But if someone's a really excellent therapist, they almost always charge a lot of money, and they're almost always really hard to book with. If you're really good, then your caseload is almost always full. So we know that is an incredible value. And the 2 things that a really excellent therapist brings are a high level of empathy, like emotional intelligence and warmth, and a lot of expertise in sort of what helps people in different situations. So it's not going to be possible to just clone these people so that everybody would have access to that. But what we can do at Peer Collective is we can make the empathy, warmth, emotionally intelligent person part really affordable so that you can get that kind of like human connection and interaction. And then we can utilize various self-help resources for getting that sort of expertise of like, so what helps if you're depressed and you're not sleeping? So, we're putting together our own courses to try to make that kind of information more readily accessible, but it's out there in the self-help world. And it's possible, like with your peer counselor, to kind of look at, so if you're talking with someone who has been through depression and has been through insomnia, then what helped you? What are the resources that you found? Let's look at them together. And the person that you're talking to at Peer Collective isn't going to be an expert in those things, but they're going to be somebody who has found at least something that worked for them and can help you kind of try to negotiate and look for something, like find those resources in the world. And then hopefully in the future, we'll be able to offer them kind of all as a package. But for right now, it's basically just like finding someone who is an expert and really emotionally intelligent. There's just not enough of those people to go around, but there is enough of people who are just emotionally intelligent. And we want to make that something that everybody can access.
Wonderful. And, the one, I think, solution that you have narrowed down is this price point, as you're saying, and as well within providing someone to listen to, because, as you said, you have many different people price pointing at, upwards of $200 an hour in order to seek out these services. And sometimes it's not even, provided by insurances. So to bring this out of pocket, it's extremely hard. And as well, one of the issues is you have 6-month waiting times or even longer for a lot of people to even seek out these services, if it's even at a cheaper price point. And for what Peer Collective is trying to do, if say this becomes the new realm of people, trying to seek out emotionally intelligent people, how is Peer Collective going to, work around the aspect of a large influx of people? Like, if per se you're solving the issue of that there's expertise and emotional intelligent people out there who are not easily accessible, but then we're bringing it to the emotional intelligent people, how are you able to solve that problem if it comes to that point, as, as you're saying, online peer counseling is going to be a new realm in terms of how we're able to provide resources for people?
Yeah, so I believe, and so I hope, if it were possible to create this type of world that we're describing, if it was possible to create the type of world where everybody could just hit a button on their phone and talk to someone supportive, basically what that means is that online peer counseling would be kind of the number one first line treatment for mental health. And that professional support, like seeing a psychologist, psychiatrist, those would be sort of like second line treatments in terms of like for people who need more. And like sort of the system could be set up in that way. And I think that would be a more efficient and more effective way. And it would be a type of system that that a lot more people would be getting a lot more support and probably not needing to be escalated. The question is sort of, how do you scale this? And I think that's a big problem. That's really kind of what we're looking at. The great thing is that our video assessment is based on research that's about something called the facilitative interpersonal skills assessment. And this is an assessment that Tim Anderson, a psychotherapy researcher, developed, and has been shown that it predicts really well what counselors are going to be more effective, like the sort of level of effectiveness of a counselor. The thing that we found at Peer Collective is that lots of people want to be peer counselors. And the idea of being able to make $20 an hour, sort of like $10 for a half-hour session, from wherever you want to be, is something that a lot of people really respond to. And I believe that that the number of applicants wanting to be peer counselors is tremendous. And we can then just filter using our video assessment to basically only have people who are well above average listeners, just like the really good kind of like top 10% of like emotionally intelligent, good listeners. And in doing so, I mean, I don't know I mean, I feel like we could easily build a workforce of tens or even hundreds of thousands of people around the world um, who, yeah, would be available for people. And I think it's something that people want to be able to do as peer counselors, and it's something that's really needed. So I think that it's all there, and we just have to kind of execute it.
Wonderful. And then, looking at the other side of things, you have the desire for people to want to listen, to provide the support. But if you look at the flip side, obviously, you spoke a little bit about the issues of what holds people back, whether it's money, resources, stigma, there's many different avenues that are pulling people back from taking that next step. And even within my own personal experience, I've had people reach out to me and their preferred way of contact is strictly through, messenger. It's through whether it's text, email, and such. And for someone who struggles with stepping outside of their comfort zone, stepping outside of their box in order to, seek out services beyond just text, email, messenger, I've had people, do this and maybe they don't feel this, sense of comfort in order to take that next step.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to be able to, allow people to want to take that next step? Because I believe there's about,
Yeah.
close to 50% of people who, haven't been, whether it's diagnosed or so forth, that haven't been seeking out this treatment. So how is Peer Collective gonna, tap into that market
Mhm.
besides just working with people who already seek out therapeutic services today?
One thing that we found when we were doing research at Google is that talking with a peer, people feel really differently than talking with a professional.
Mhm.
And we didn't think that we were going to have like people referring their colleagues to to try out our services, and we did. People would email us and say, hey, we heard you're doing another trial. I'd love to, like someone that I work with told me about it. I'd love to try it. And the idea is that there's just like going to a professional. I think there's something about because there is that sort of medicalized model that a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them follow. It tends for a lot of people to feel like this is kind of an admission that I couldn't do it on my own. And I think that when you make something really easy to use, so that it's especially if you have some free, if you can try for free and you can like just talk whenever you can, and it's a shorter session and kind of whatever, like doing something like that, just making it really easy. What we found is like people will want to try, and that's, yeah, it becomes a lot easier for them.
And it brings about this topic of, as you're saying, you still have to do the work yourselves in terms of, bringing that back into your
Yeah.
lifestyle. Because when you work with a therapist, it's not just, all right, you work through maybe a trauma that you've experienced and now you're completely okay and you rid yourself of whatever challenges that you have. You have to
Mm-hmm.
bring some tangible resources and some tangible activities that you can have within your life to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's of, the most valuable aspect of this is it's someone to listen and then teach you tangible, exercises that they've been able to use. And as you're saying, once you have courses, then it can provide, that accessibility for someone to say, all right, I could do this on my own. I could take that initiative within myself more than, just speaking with someone just to analyze what I've been through. And I think that's definitely, one of the most valuable keys that it could bring about, because a lot of people struggling with making that initiative with by themselves.
Yeah.
W-
Yeah. Yeah.
Within a question that I love to ask my guests as kind of a wrap up and see what their hopes are for the future, am intrigued about what is going to be your answer, because through most people who I interview, it's somebody who's personally experienced a challenge, or it's somebody, whether they're a therapist or psychotherapist, that is in a field that maybe they have to work in order to gain clients, or they don't have enough resources to build out the initiatives that they want to promote. And for yourself, you've been able to really kickstart some great projects. You've been able to write books. You really haven't been held back in terms of resources. You've been able to create it yourselves. And what this question is really trying to ask you is a hypothetical question of, if you were to be given a large sum of money, some funding, in order to work towards the initiative of solving the crises that we're seeing within the mental health industry. So whether it's in terms of building upon Peer Collective, or whether it's building upon other avenues in order to take that next step, as you have created the Morning Sun Mindfulness Center, where would you allocate more resources if you were given more funding in order to solve the problems that we are seeing today?
So yeah, like the big picture for me. So I think that for me, meditation is really helpful, but I know that meditation requires effort, and not everybody wants to put in effort. And that counseling is a lot. It requires some effort to put yourself out there and seek counseling, but it's a lot easier than like trying to sort of meditate on your own. So I believe more in a system based in counseling. What I'd love to create, I mean, I'd love for Peer Collective to be free and available to everybody. I'd love for there to be kind of like in-person places that people could go to for peer counseling. If there was sort of a limitless budget, that you could sort of create like a community centers where you could kind of like have walk-in peer counseling. The issue there is that you'd have less choice about who you're going to talk to, but it could be in person. And then on top of that, I'd like for people, I mean, I feel like an ideal mental health system for me you'd have ongoing peer counseling, and then you'd have periods where you'd take a day or 2 days or 3 days to do some sort of like intensive work, whether it's sort of like on a retreat, like facilitated with a professional, where you're kind of, you take like several hours a day and you go really deep into whatever challenges you're facing. And then in between those happen like, twice a year. And then in between those, you have kind of general support. So I mean, I feel like that could be a really great system. It's very different than how we set it up right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that, Tim. I really appreciate it. And it gives a glimpse into what you're doing now with Peer Collective, and what your hopes are for the future with what we can do in order to solve some of the challenges that we see within the world today. So I'd love to thank you for taking this time with me to be on the Mental Insights podcast, to share the insights that you have, and really bring about a new approach to what we're seeing today within the industry.
Thank you. It's really been great to talk with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. And thank you all again for listening to the Mental Insights podcast. This was season 2, episode number 15 with Tim Desmond. You can check out all the links below in the show notes, and please let us know what you guys think of these episodes. Please like, subscribe, review, and be sure to go back to part 1 of this episode if you haven't listened to already. So thank you all for listening again to the Mental Insights podcast. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Mental Insights podcast. Make sure to reach out to today's guest or myself if you need any advice, guidance, or support in your life today. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and review to this podcast so we know what you thought of this episode. I look forward to being in touch with you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a wonderful day.